There is a specific kind of silence that happens in a waiting room when something is about to go wrong for someone who doesn't yet know it's about to go wrong for them. 4 plastic chairs along the wall. A television mounted in the corner playing a channel no one selected. A man behind a front desk pretending to type. I have sat in that silence from both sides. I know what it feels like when you're the one waiting. I also know what it feels like to be the reason for it. On a Monday afternoon in April, I walked into that waiting room with a manila envelope under my arm and a 70% blockage in my circumflex artery that someone in that building had told me 4 days earlier was not there. I want to tell you what was in that envelope. But first, let me back up. Welcome to Real Life Verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. My name is Stanley. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a 2-bedroom ranch house on the south side of town, and I have lived alone there for 6 years, which is how long it has been since my wife Carol died. The second bedroom still has her sewing machine in it. I set it up the way she had it. I don't go in there much, but I like knowing it's there. I drive a 2006 Toyota Tacoma with 187,000 miles on it. There's a coffee stain on the passenger seat from 2014 that I have tried 4 different products on. It's still there. The toolbox in the bed is organized the way some people's kitchens aren't. I spent 31 years with the county ambulance service, 19 years on the street, 12 as a field training officer. I ran codes in living rooms. I delivered a breech berth in a parking lot once. I taught 3 generations of rookies how to read what a body is telling you when the person attached to it can't find the words. 2 years ago, my knees told me something my pride had been arguing about for a while. I retired. What I did not do was stop paying attention. Every month I run a free Stop the Bleed course at the county library. I teach normal people how to pack a wound and when to use a tourniquet. I buy the supplies myself and store them in my garage because I don't trust the library's climate control. I keep my ACLS current. My pals, installs this. Not because I have to, because the knowledge matters whether or not there's a job attached to it. This is relevant. I promise you this is relevant. My regular doctor is a man named Dr. Okafor. I have seen him for 9 years. He knows my history. He knows my family history. He knows the things I know about my own body, and he has the sense not to argue with me about them. In late March of this year, Dr. Okafor went on family leave. The practice sent me a notice. My next appointment would be reassigned to the new physician, Dr. Trevor Bancroft, who had joined the practice 6 weeks prior. I noted that. Put the notice on the refrigerator under a magnet from a conference I attended in 2019. Then on April 15th, I woke up at 4:20 in the morning with a feeling in my chest that I told myself was probably the chili. I ate chili for dinner on April 14th. This is the honest truth, and I mention it because I gave the chili every reasonable chance to be the explanation. The discomfort started in my epigastric region. That's the upper middle abdomen, below the sternum. I took 2 antacids and lay back down. I waited. The antacids did what antacids do, which is nothing, because this was not antacid territory. By noon, it had moved, slightly left. The kind of shift you only notice if you've been paying close attention, and I had been paying close attention because that is what I do. And then I noticed I was sweating. I was sitting completely still in my kitchen, and I was sweating. Not from exertion, not from temperature, just diaphoretic, quietly. The way a body sometimes announces something it doesn't want to say out loud. I went to the bathroom and took my blood pressure with the cuff I keep in the closet there. 162/94, pulse 88 and regular. I stood in the bathroom for a moment with those numbers in my head. Then I called the clinic. They could not see me until April 18th. 3 days. The scheduler asked if I wanted to go to the emergency room. I thought about it. I know what happens when a 64-year-old man walks into a county ER saying he thinks he might be having a cardiac event, but his pain is 4 out of 10, and he drove himself. I know exactly what happens because I've been in 1,000 of those ERs, and I've handed off 100 of those patients. He sits in triage for 90 minutes while they rule out the obvious, and then they admit him for observation, and he spends the night watching a ceiling and answering the same questions on 4-hour rotations. I had time. I thought I had time. I took an aspirin and I kept a notebook. The next 2 days, April 16th and 17th, I monitored. Every 6 hours, blood pressure, pulse, notation of symptoms. I slept propped on 3 pillows because lying flat made the discomfort worse, which was information. I did not call my daughter Jennifer in Columbus because I didn't want to worry her with something that might be nothing. And if it was something, I would tell her once I knew what I was dealing with. That was the logic. She would not have called it logic. I know that. I thought about calling Marcus. I decided to wait until after the appointment. I was fine. Probably. On the morning of April 18th, I drove myself to the county health clinic in a Tacoma with a coffee stain on the passenger seat, and I went inside, and a nurse named Denise Kowalski called my name from the hallway. I want to stay here for just a moment. With Denise. She's been a nurse at that clinic for 18 years. She wears reading glasses on a beaded chain her daughter made in middle school. One bead is cracked. She hasn't replaced it. In 2015, there was a car accident on Route 9. Denise was the driver in one of the vehicles. I was the first rig on scene. I stayed with her while the fire department cut her door off. I told her exactly what they were doing and exactly why at every step. Because I have found that what people need in the worst moment of their lives is not comfort. It is information. It is someone who will treat them like an adult while their door is being removed. She remembered. She took my vitals. BP 158/92, pulse 84, O2 saturation 96%. She wrote the numbers on the chart in a way that was hard to miss. Then she looked at me the way she looked at me through that car window in 2015, and she asked, "Stanley, these numbers, you came in alone?" I said yes. She didn't say anything else. She walked out of the room, and 7 minutes later, Dr. Trevor Bancroft came in. He was younger than I expected. Not young. Early 40s, maybe. He had the kind of confidence that settles on a person before they've had enough chances to be wrong. He read the chart for 30 seconds, which is not enough time to read it the way it deserved to be read. Then he looked up at me and asked what brought me in today. I told him. 3 days of epigastric and left-sided chest discomfort. Diaphoresis at rest, elevated blood pressure with no change in my baseline medications. Family history of coronary artery disease. My father had his first MI at 61. I described the symptom progression, the timing, the location, the character of the discomfort. I reported it the way I would have reported it handing off a patient to an ER doc. Precise, clinical, without alarm because alarm is noise, and I was trying to give him signal. He examined me, listened to my heart and lungs, palpated my abdomen. He asked if I'd been under stress lately. I said no more than usual. He asked about my diet. I mentioned the chili, and he nodded the way people nod when they've already decided something. Then he asked if I'd been worried about my health lately. I said I hadn't been worried. I said I'd been paying attention. He smiled. The smile meant he thought he was connecting with me. I've given that smile myself when I thought I knew more than I did. I recognized it. He said, "What you're describing sounds scary, but that's not what's happening here." I did not say anything. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell him what I knew or what I'd done for 31 years, or what I recognized in my own body at 4 a.m. with sweat running down my back for no reason. I want you to understand something about me. I have been in rooms where people were dying, and I have been the calmest person present, not because I didn't care, because calm is a tool. Panic is expensive, and I have never been able to afford it. I listened while Dr. Bancroft told me I was experiencing gastroesophageal reflux with associated anxiety. He used the phrase, "what you're experiencing," 4 times in 2 minutes. I counted. He prescribed a proton pump inhibitor and offered a referral to a gastroenterologist. I took the prescription slip. I folded it. I put it in my pocket. I said, "Thank you." And I had one thing left to check. Marcus Webb is 41 years old. He drives a Subaru Forester with a dented rear bumper from backing into his own mailbox and a child's car seat still installed in the back, even though his youngest is 9. He keeps meaning to take it out. I did not call Marcus after the appointment. Not that day. I drove home in the Tacoma, and I sat in the parking lot of the county EMS headquarters for a little while. I don't know exactly how long, and then I drove home without going inside. I spread my pocket notebook on the kitchen table, and I looked at 6 days of blood pressure readings. Then I called Rita. Rita Alvarez is 67 years old. She was my dispatch supervisor for 14 of the years I was on the street. She retired 6 months after I did. She has a coffee mug on her desk that says "World's Okayest Paramedic" that her crew gave her as a retirement gift. She uses it every day. She still sits on the county EMS advisory board, which means she still has access to the regional incident reporting system. I told her what I needed. Not everything. I told her I needed to see 4 specific cases from 2011, 2014, 2016, and 2018. I didn't explain why yet. She didn't ask. She said, "You taught half the people who wrote these reports. If you say you taught half the people who wrote these reports, if you say you know what you're feeling, I believe you." The envelope arrived at my house at 6 o'clock that evening. "I want you to stay with me here, because this is where everything I thought I understood about that appointment started to come apart and reassemble into something else." I spread the 4 incident reports on my kitchen table under the overhead light. These were cases I had worked, 2 as the primary paramedic, 2 as the supervising FTO on scene. All 4 patients were over 55. All 4 presented with atypical symptoms: epigastric discomfort, diaphoresis, elevated pressure, no crushing chest pain, nothing that announces itself the way heart attacks announce themselves in movies. All 4 were posterior MI. In all 4 cases, I had identified what was happening in the field, before the hospital, before the labs. In all 4 cases, the hospital outcome confirmed the field assessment. I read those reports for a long time. Here's what I want you to understand about posterior MI, the back wall of the heart. When that territory goes down, it does not always show up where you expect it on an EKG. A standard 12 lead can look almost normal in the first hours. 40% of the time, in the first 6 hours, the EKG is not going to tell you the story. You have to look at the patient. You have to listen to what they're describing and know what it means. I have been teaching that in a classroom for 12 years. I looked at the reports on my kitchen table. I looked at my notebook with 6 days of blood pressure readings. I looked at the prescription slip for the proton pump inhibitor that was still folded in my pocket. I thought about whether I was seeing something that wasn't there. I gave that possibility a fair hearing. I have been wrong before. Every medic has. The ones who haven't been wrong, yet simply haven't been at it long enough. But I had a feeling, not fear, not anxiety, something more like recognition. The same thing I felt in 2014, standing over a 60-year-old woman on her kitchen floor who kept insisting she was fine, she'd just eaten something bad, before her pressure dropped and everything got very busy very fast. I was not going to be her. I monitored through April 19th and 20th and 20th and 21st. Symptoms steady, not improving, not escalating. Plateauing in the way that things plateau when they are waiting for something. On the evening of April 21st, I called Marcus. I told him I needed a ride to an appointment the next day at 2 in the afternoon. He asked why. I told him I'd explain in person. There was a pause on the line. Not long. 3, 4 seconds. Then he said, "I'm coming to get you. Don't argue. Now, here is what I need to tell you. The thing I've been holding back since the beginning of this story. When I walked into that appointment on April 18th, Dr. Bancroft looked at the intake form and saw retired paramedic and processed it the way a person processes background noise. Former ambulance driver, blue-collar patient in jeans and a Carhartt jacket, presenting with vague symptoms and probable health anxiety. He did not know that I hold current certifications in ACLS, PALS, and PHTLS. Not past certifications, current ones. Maintained into retirement because the knowledge matters whether or not there's a paycheck behind it. He did not know that I've personally managed or supervised the pre-hospital care of 4 patients presenting with the exact constellation of symptoms I described to him in that exam room. He did not know that I have taught the pathophysiology of cardiac emergencies in a classroom for over a decade, that I know the modified Scarbossa criteria, that I can list the complications of posterior MI in order of likelihood while I am half asleep, which I know because I have been half asleep for 3 days, and I was doing exactly that. He heard what you're experiencing when I was reporting clinical findings. He mistook competence for anxiety. He mistook 31 years for nothing. The morning of April 22nd, Marcus drove me to County General at 7 a.m. The ER attending there is a woman I worked alongside for 9 years. She ordered the workup without ceremony. Troponin came back elevated. The EKG showed changes that rewarded someone who knew where to look. They admitted me. Cardiology scheduled a left heart cath, 70% occlusion in the circumflex artery. That is not reflux. I was scheduled for stent placement the following morning, but first I had somewhere to be. At 2 p.m. on April 22nd, Marcus pulled the Subaru with the dented bumper into the clinic parking lot, and I got out with the manila envelope under my arm, and we walked inside. Inside the envelope, 4 incident reports with patient identifiers redacted, a copy of my FTL certification, my current ACLS card, and a 1-page summary of posterior MI presentation written in the clinical language it deserves. At the top of that page I had written, "This is what I was describing. This is what I know. You told me that's not what's happening here. I told the front desk I'd like to see Dr. Bancroft. They said he was with patients. I said I'd wait." Marcus sat down next to me. The television in the corner played a channel no one selected. Denise was behind the nurse's station with a clear line of sight to the waiting room. When she saw us, her face did something. At 2:40 p.m., Dr. Bancroft came out and asked if I needed to reschedule. I stood up. I handed him the envelope. He read it. I watched him read it. I watched his eyes move across the incident reports. I watched the moment the FTO certification registered and what that meant. I watched the moment he understood what it meant that the man standing in front of him in jeans and a Carhartt jacket had written the assessment protocols that his staff were trained on. He looked up. He said they should do an EKG and troponin right now. I said, "What you're describing sounds scary, but that's not what's happening here." The same words. His words. Not delivered with cruelty. Delivered the way you state a fact. I told him I had gone to County General that morning. I told him about the elevated troponin, the EKG findings, the cath result, the 70% occlusion, the stent placement scheduled for the following morning. I used clinical language, not because I wanted to impress him, but because I needed him to understand that I had been speaking clinical language 4 days ago in his exam room, and he had decided to translate it into something simpler. I told him I came to make sure he understood what he missed. He held the envelope. The color had gone out of his face, the way color goes when a body is redistributing blood to places it considers more urgent. He looked at the papers. He looked at the wall just past my left shoulder. He did not look at Denise. Marcus held the door open. I took the envelope back. We walked out. Marcus stopped at Culver's on the way home. I hadn't eaten anything but hospital food in 10 hours, and he had a theory about concrete custard that I wasn't in a position to argue with. He turned out to be right. I sat in the passenger seat of the Subaru with the child's car seat still installed behind me and watched the south side of town go past the window. Familiar streets, the road by the fairgrounds, the stretch past the high school where I have responded to 3 accidents over 31 years, 2 of them fender benders, 1 of them not. The coffee stain was on the other car. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 4 days. The food was good. I thought about Denise writing those vitals in a way that was hard to miss, and about Marcus picking up the phone and knowing without being told, and about Rita putting 4 incident reports in a manila envelope without asking for an explanation I hadn't offered yet. I thought about the word experiencing, used 4 times in 2 minutes to describe something I had already assessed, already documented, and already understood. I spent 31 years in this county teaching people that what a patient reports is data, that the body is not performing anxiety for your benefit, that dismissing what you're hearing because it doesn't fit what you expected is not reassurance. It is a decision with consequences. He knows that now. I've been in enough rooms to know how these things travel. In a county where half the medics and nurses sat in a classroom where I stood at the front, the story doesn't need names attached. It will move anyway. It will move the way water moves, quietly, along the path of least resistance, filling every space it can find. I'm scheduled for discharge in 3 days. Jennifer is driving down from Columbus. I should have called her sooner. The sun was still up when we pulled into my driveway. That's the thing about April. You expect winter and it gives you evening light. I sat there for a moment with the door open and the cold air coming in. I have spent 31 years knowing what the body knows before the mind catches up. I finally just stopped arguing with it.